A really easy one-pot soup to make is Zuppa Toscana. However, if you have a pressure cooker, I'm gonna show you a way to make it even easier with less prep. We're basically going to dump and cook. So let's get started. Welcome to the Salt and Pepper, where we cook for real life, using real food, and we keep it real simple. So today we're gonna make soup, which is one of my favorite things to do in the pressure cooker. I just love the way that you can dump things in and pressure cook and have a delicious soup in under an hour. That's super flavorful. Well, we are going to do that with a very popular Zuppa Toscana soup that I think people all over the place have tried from Olive Garden, except for me. I've never had it. I don't know what it's supposed to taste like. I know I changed some ingredients. I took some liberties here. I made it with what I had on hand, but it was delicious and I can't wait to share it with you. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is saute the sausage and the bacon. What I have is 18 or 19 ounces of Italian sausage. I chose mild for mine. You could use the sweet kind, you could use the hot kind, you could use a combination. You could actually even make it a little bit more sausagey and increase the amounts. No problems there whatsoever. So we're gonna saute this in the pot. I haven't even turned the pot on, that's okay. It's gonna be perfectly fine. And we're also going to saute 2 pieces of thick cut applewood smoked bacon. You could use whatever bacon you want. I do recommend thick cut. And we're gonna saute those together. But guess what? We're not gonna remove them. No. We're gonna leave all of that in there to flavor the soup. Now, if you don't wanna leave all the grease that's left over from the bacon, you don't have to. You can remove it. But I didn't, and it turned out really nice. So let's turn the Ninja Foodi on, which is what I'm using. You could use your Instant Pot. We're gonna do sear saute on high is what I want, and hit the start button. Now, we'll let this heat up, saute the sausage and the bacon. While that's going on, let me tell you what I did the first time I made this soup, which was not even bother with this step. This step is actually optional. You could move on to just dumping the rest of the ingredients in and getting under pressure, and it works out fine. The only problem that I had with doing it that way was the texture of the sausage was not exactly the way that I wanted it. It was a little too soft. Like it didn't have a snappy texture that I wanted. So that's completely up to you. If you like the softer sausage, you can absolutely skip this step. But I'm gonna brown it up because I think that's gonna help it retain its firmness. Also, I'm leaving the casings on. I understand that's not really traditional in a Zuppa Toscana. It's usually ground sausage, but we're pressure cooking. The casings pretty much disappear anyway under pressure, so don't worry about that, just leave them on. Okay, so we've got a nice little browning on the sausage. Now I'm gonna add in 1 bulb of crushed garlic cloves. So this was about 8 cloves of garlic that I just peeled and smashed. You could use about 2 teaspoons to a tablespoon of minced garlic, but I like to just use the whole cloves. I think it gives it a more rounded garlic taste. It's not quite as pungent, and I just like the way it works in the recipe, but that's totally up to you. Saute those just a little bit so they get fragrant, and I can already smell them. Oh my gosh. Now we want to deglaze the pot. I'm going to do that with a different tool just because it's a little bit easier to scrape the bottom with this than my spatula. I'm putting in 6 cups of chicken stock. And now I'm just going to go along the bottom and loosen up anything that was browned onto the bottom. That is called fond, and it is extremely flavorful, and we want to get that into our soup. All right, one last pass over here just to make sure, and it feels good. I don't feel anything there. Now it's all about just dumping in ingredients, okay? We're not cutting anything up or anything. It's just amazing how easy this is. Putting in 2 Vidalia onions whole that I just, peeled and cut off the ends, that's all. Now I'm gonna add in my seasoning blend. What I'm using is 1.5 teaspoons of fine grind sea salt, 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning, half of a teaspoon of basil, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, and between 1/4 and 1/2 of a teaspoon of red pepper flakes. The red pepper flakes are gonna add some spiciness. I'm using the mild sausage, so I feel perfectly comfortable doing that. If you don't want any spice in your soup, then omit that. And I also have buried underneath of here 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. That's optional. Again, it adds a tidbit of peppery flavor to it, which I think is delicious. We're gonna dump those in, give it a little stir, and then add in the rest of the ingredients and go under pressure. Now, typically what's used is cannellini beans in this. You could use dry or canned, but if you're gonna use canned, you're gonna adjust the amount of broth and you can adjust the amount of pressure cook time. So if you wanna use canned, that would be a shortcut. Drain them, use what would be equivalent of about 3 cups of beans, and then decrease your stock by 2 cups is what I would do, and then decrease your pressure cook time to about 10 minutes. But I'm using dried beans and I'm using Great Northern beans because that's what I had. That's what I'm gonna use. It turned out amazing, but we have to pressure cook longer and add that little extra bit of stock, okay? And I'm using 1.5 cups of beans total that were just rinsed, not soaked. You don't need to do that when you're pressure cooking. And then I have 4 good size Yukon Gold potatoes or yellow potatoes, and I'm gonna put those in. That's another ingredient that I sort of switched up for a reason. I used russet potatoes, which is traditional in this recipe, and they were a little too soft at the end of the pressure cook time with the dried beans, right? Because we have to base the pressure cook time on the longest cooking ingredient, which in this case is the dried beans. So I thought, well, let's switch that up to Yukon Gold, which are a little firmer of a potato, and I think we'll have a better bite in our soup. So we're gonna do that, and now we put the pressure lid down. Make sure your valve is to the seal, whether you're using a 2-lid model or a 1-lid model of Ninja Foodi, or if you're using your Instant Pot, just make sure your valve's to the seal. We're gonna set this over to the pressure cook mode. I do have to cancel out the sear saute. So once I canceled out the sear saute, we've got high pressure. That's what we want. This is our time here. I'm going to take it up to 25 minutes. I have tested the recipe going 30 minutes, and I thought the beans were just a little bit too soft for my liking. In fact, you didn't really notice them too much in the soup, so we're taking that down to 25 minutes. And on this model, we can set our release. This is why I like the OL701. We don't have to even be around in 25 minutes. Well, actually, it'll be more like 40 minutes once it comes to pressure. We don't have to be around. It will immediately release the pressure when we set that. So once we have our high pressure set for 25 minutes, if you have the OL701, you can program by turning your little dial here to where it says quick release. Or if you were making a soup that required a natural release for a period of time before the pressure was released, you can go down here to a delayed release. But for this, we're gonna do a quick release. We don't have enough beans in the pot to worry about them overflowing or foaming out. So quick release is perfectly fine for this recipe. And then we just hit start. Now, it will take a little bit of time to preheat and go under pressure. Even though the contents are hot, it's still a full pot. So I would say it's gonna take somewhere between 8 and 12 minutes for it to come to pressure, and then we will pressure cook for 25 minutes. The Ninja Foodi will release the pressure for me on its own. It will revert to keep warm, and then we will add in those little extra ingredients and our garnishes, and we'll be serving up a delicious soup. The first thing that I always recommend doing when you are making anything with beans is to taste one of the beans for tenderness. So I'm just gonna scoop one out here that I can find and put it right here in this bowl. You wanna make sure your beans are exactly the way you want them cooked. Oh, now they're perfect for me, but they have a little bit of bite to them still. So if you want a softer bean, increase your pressure cook time to 30 minutes. But for me, these are perfect. Oh, and I'm getting a little bit of spice from those pepper flakes. Oh my gosh, this is gonna be so good. Now, you can do one or two things. You can remove the potatoes and the onion to chop them up. Or if you have a mix and chop, you could actually just chop them up right in the bowl. Most people probably don't have one, so I'll go ahead and remove the onion. I'm using just a scoop that has holes in it so I don't get too much juice on my cutting board here. And I'm just gonna put those right on the cutting board. See how they held their shape, but they're gonna be cooked through beautifully. Same thing with the potatoes. Now, if you're using russets, you can pressure cook them with the skin on and then peel the skin off if you don't want that in your soup. With the Yukon Gold, the skin is so thin, I'm not gonna worry about it. So I'm just gonna chop them up with the skin on. But again, they're cooked all the way through. You can easily remove the skin by just peeling it off with a knife. This looks so, so good. Let's get this last onion out, which kind of fell apart. So you know what? I'm just gonna leave it in there like it is, bigger chunks. No problem. There we go. And then this one, last little potato. All right, now, usually you put in kale, but I didn't have any and I had spinach. So I used spinach in the soup. I thought it worked out beautifully. If you're gonna use kale, you're gonna have to cook it longer, okay? So really with the kale, you might even consider putting it in the beginning before you pressure cook. Although I think that might be a tad bit too much for kale. So it's gonna be a little tricky if you wanna substitute kale. You could pressure cook half the time, do an immediate release, throw in your kale, then pressure cook the rest. Or you could add in more stock and even simmer the kale until it's done. But of course, that's gonna add time. But with spinach, we don't have to worry about that. We just dump it in. I'm using about 8 ounces of spinach. You could use as much or as little as you like. And then stir it in and get it underneath that hot broth as much as you can. That's gonna wilt the spinach, but keep it nice and bright and beautiful. Oh my gosh, this looks so good. All right, let me go ahead and chop up these potatoes and get them back in. Oh, beautiful, wonderful. Now you can chop them as big or as little as you want. These are a little softer actually than I would like. I'm not sure why they softened up so much. They were probably smaller potatoes. Now this one's cooked perfectly, so it really is about the size. So get the biggest Yukon Gold you can if you're gonna use this quick and easy technique of putting everything in whole, which I absolutely love doing. All right, last thing we add to our soup is some heavy cream. I have 1 cup of heavy cream here. You could add more if you wanted it to be more brothy. You could even add in some more chicken stock if you wanted to. So it's your soup. Go ahead and make it the way you want. But for me, this is perfect. It looks absolutely beautiful. Oh my gosh. So normally you would put some crispy bacon. So what I did to make these like bacon bits is I chopped up 2 slices of thick cut bacon and I sauteed them over medium heat in a frying pan until all the fat rendered, then let them drain on some paper towels. They're super crispy. Then usually you put on grated Parmesan cheese. However, what I found is I like shaved Parmesan on top better than using grated. I like the way it holds up in the soup and doesn't melt as quickly. I just really was a fan of it. So that's what I'm gonna use, but you could use grated Parmesan. And then when you're making a traditional Italian soup like this, usually they'll put bread or a crostini on top or even serve the soup over a crostini, kind of like we would think of a French onion soup. But I didn't have any bread. I didn't have anything to make a crostini with, but I did have some air fryer fried croutons, right? So I thought, let's go ahead and add those in to give that little bit of crunch to our soup. So now we've got all kinds of textures and flavors going on. This is going to be amazing. I'm gonna let it cool just a minute, and I wanted to tell you a story about why I even made this. Since I've never had it before, why would I even try to make it, especially make a recipe? That's not usually how I do things. But my friend Colleen was making this the other night, and she said, it's such an easy and delicious soup. She said, I'm gonna give you my recipe, and then you can make it, and if you like it, you can put it on your website. And I was so appreciative of that. And we happened to be at the grocery store. So I'm like, Colleen, can you hurry up and screenshot me the ingredient list? But I didn't get it in time. We had already pulled out of the parking lot of the grocery store. So I didn't have all the ingredients that she used, which was kale, more traditional ingredients, right? And then I was looking at the steps and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're ready to eat dinner now. I was going to test it, just to make dinner for Jeff and me. And I looked at these steps. I'm like, I don't feel like doing all that, Jeff. We're just going to dump everything in and see how it works. And it worked beautifully. And here we go. Easy peasy. All right, let's give it a taste. First, I'm really interested in these potatoes and just to see exactly how soft they are. Because the russets weren't too soft, but Yukon Gold usually hold up better. That's why I switched to them. But I think in this case, size matters. If you have large russets, they're going to take longer to cook, so they're going to hold their shape better. If you have small Yukon Golds, they're going to get softer. So use the biggest potatoes you can find. But they're amazing. Oh my goodness. Wow. Oh, this soup is so good. Oh my goodness. The flavors are amazing. Okay, now we made that change with the sausage. So let me see, is the texture as soft as it was when we did it without even browning it? No. Home run. Oh my goodness. Well, I have absolutely no idea whether this is a typical Olive Garden copycat of Zuppa Toscana, because I've never had it, but I will tell you it's absolutely delicious.